I know that we have people here in the room who'd like to also have a chance to engage with you as well as online.
Yes.
How about this? I will have a closing question for you at the end, and I'll take it in the last 5 minutes or so. But let's open up now. Let's do a first round here in the room, and then I'll come to the online audience next. And as always, tell us your name, institution, and we'll take a selection of 3 or so. Let's begin with Mark Cohen here. And Nurul, if you want to.
Thank you. Mark Cohen from Oxfam. So if I could ask you a question about the time of independence in Bangladesh and subsequently, so one of your Harvard professors who also won a Nobel Prize, Dr. Henry Kissinger, at the time of independence said, "This will never be more than a hopeless basket case." I think today no one would agree with that assessment. Bangladesh is about to become officially a middle-income country and graduate from eligibility for IDA loans. So why do you think he was wrong, and what was done to ensure that he was wrong?
Thank you, Mark. Pass the mic next to you.
But that is the question.
One moment, Nurul.
Tom
Nurul?
Timberg, consultant. I almost apologize because your question I would love to hear the answer to. My questions were to some extent a little bit more personal, which is now that Rahman Subhan and Najmul Hussain and all these other people have published memoirs, are you considering or have you written a memoir? And if you're not, I would encourage you either to agree to some oral history or perhaps be sure that your papers are in order, because the thing that they have not, they generally have covered very extensively on both sides, the independence period. The period which is still not very heavily covered is the period of the Awami League government between 71 and 75. Now, maybe there's a problem about the fact that this is still politically not entirely behind us, but I wondered if you're planning to do something more formal in terms of reviewing that experience in particular.
Thank you. And we have Rob Voss at the back who had his hand up earlier. That's okay, he has the mic.
Thanks, Nurul, for interesting insights. I just want to follow up on the previous 2 questions. I wondered what the 60 plus, the plus part, stands for, how long it goes back, but let me be on the safe side and ask you about 51 years back when Gunnar Myrdal published Asian Drama.
Can you hear loud properly?
No.
Okay, yeah. Maybe to, he's talking about Gunnar Myrdal's publication 51 years ago, but go ahead and I'll...
Asian Drama. And
yes.
My question is, what do you thought of that book at the time, and what do you think of it now?
I've forgotten.
Okay. And let's take these 3 and then we'll come back. Huh? Nurul, whichever.
Now, 2 questions specifically on Bangladesh, another one on Asia. Now, the last one, I'm sorry, I've forgotten. I read the book 50 years ago. I've forgotten his main thesis. If you remind me later on, I'll discuss that. But as far as memoirs, I've already written a memoirs 2 years ago. This is the 3rd memoir, a 2nd memoir. So that is taken care of now.
We will share with you the links if Nurul is...
But about Kissinger versus Bangladesh today, that's a question which is not very relevant, is it? Anyway, I'll tell you. Kissinger said he never said it. It's in the book, his book and others' book. Some State Department official wrote it, and he just read it. Now, in fact, since you believe in anecdotes, I met him in 73, Bangladesh. So after meeting the Prime Minister, he came to the press conference. He said, I met a great man, historical figure, for my first time in my life. I'm delighted to meet him, and I'm also delighted to come to this country, which is made so. 73, I was very impressed, whatever they've done in the last few months, 2 years, in the construction, development, etc. So that answers your first part of your question. So what happened to develop Our colleague next door to you has written a book on the subject. There are all kinds of theses going around. I will give a short summary, one sentence summary. Bangladesh developed up to here for one singular factor. Average Bangladeshi, not the elite necessarily, are extremely entrepreneurial. Though they have responded to challenge enormously well. It's a challenge and response from a very low state and response magnificently well. If you study the history, the rural development in Bangladesh and all the non-farm rural sector, you see it is the individual entrepreneur and the governments, in my view, it will be a very popular view, they have kept out of the way, done very well in doing that.
Nurul, thank you for that. Let me come online, Katarla, for any online questions. If not, I come back to the room. Let's take you, sir, and if you can name an institution.
MG Kibriya, formerly of Asian Development Bank, currently Morgan State University. 60 years is a long time, okay? So over the years, I'm sure you must have some changes with respect to various policies, like do you have any change with respect to poverty reduction policies, with respect to foreign aid, with respect to trade, or has your opinion remained more or less fixed?
Okay, thank you very much. If there are any further questions in the room that I can't see, this would be a good time to let me know. If not, Nurul, we're going to come back to you. And
One more question, finished?
No. No, you can get away from us. And I know the audience will be thinking, but let me come back and ask his question, which is essentially, if I understand you correctly, how has your own thinking on policies evolved?
Yeah.
Exactly. Has your own thinking on policies evolved? And
If I understand, on trade policy and poverty reduction policy and?
yeah, your own thinking over the years with your own experience that you have today,
Own experience in terms of policy on influencing policy, which one? Just actual policy? Well, I don't think there has been a significant change. Honest, I will just think about it. What I thought about some policy before and I've changed my mind. At that stage, we didn't really give a lot of thought to various measures, let us say safety net measures or social security measures. In those days, we didn't have any serious thought about it. We didn't know about it. I had to learn from the rest of the world's experience. Aside from what else would be trade policies, we knew what was wrong, what was bad, what should be done. And what else? I don't know.
So Nurul, let me come back to your example for a moment, if you permit me, and see if that, early in this conversation, you shared with us examples of the interaction with policymakers and how they responded to or didn't respond to, responded in different ways. And I myself am curious, from those examples, how has your own thinking evolved in terms of what policy options are viable? I'm curious, what advice would you have for our colleagues here in terms of not just communication, but even the viability of policies? And that's where I'm wondering where your own thinking has changed in terms of what policies are viable.
I would request the economists to understand the politics of the country before going around advising them, even national politicians or economists or outsiders. It's impossible to advise or be effective or even get a real communication done unless you understand the political constraints, the feasibility of that country. So for Bangladeshi economists or Indian economists who don't understand the politics of the country, the political forces operating there, is not very useful for them. They would not be very useful advisor to the government. You have to admit that these are limitations. I cannot go beyond this. For example, we suggested land reform, correct? Another example, a very common sense suggestion. At that countries, most of the countries love this kind of things. They have been trying to do all this. We said, well, there will be a ceiling on land ownership. Above this limit, let us redistribute the land to the landless laborers. Very simple, non-revolutionary proposal, right? I don't remember the ceiling. above these acres, acquire them with compensation and distribute to the landless laborers. Very acceptable, very non-revolutionary proposal, very simple proposal. We thought it would be readily accepted. Nope. We went there, talked to the Prime Minister and to the Cabinet. They said, no, this is not the time. This is not the time. This is the perfect time, we said. After independence, we have a different situation. He says, no. Do you realize, Mr. Islam, who are the party, our overwhelming members of our party? The middle-class farmers. You want them to take them away? Not a chance. We have already taken the largest scale industries under the government control, ownership. No. It was not even debated in the committee. Shelved, never done. So, my advice will be understand very carefully the political system of this country, as this Growth Commission report says, historical circumstances and the characteristics, political characteristics of that country, before we do research which will be acceptable to them. Now, supposing we say, I was discussing with Paul this morning, we have been discussing with them since if my memory serves right, since I was an FAO, in the 70s, the problem of what is optimum stocks. We discussed about these food stocks. International stocks, we had a huge program of research and infinite number of meetings on holding internationally coordinated food stocks could be released at times of crisis. I was in charge of this program. Endless efforts never got anywhere. So now at the country level, much easier, accepting that you have to allow huge margins in which if you say X, they will say X plus 20, X minus 20. And you have to live with that.
Nurul, you were a policymaker yourself at one point.
Yes.
And did you listen to your own advice on how to communicate with researchers?
No. Pardon? No. Yeah. My policy, I was policy advisor, not policy maker. Policy maker, the politicians. My boss was Prime Minister. So I advised him. But as I said, examples, some rejected, some accepted.
So we'll come back to that. But Katal, I understand we have an online question.
Yes, we have a question from Sivan Yosef, who wants to know
Sivan.
What advice you would have for young people who are entering the field of international development today?
What advice would you have for young people entering the field of development today? And that is a question I too would have liked to ask you.
But I thought I've answered it already.
You have partly.
One
can also get very
one
discouraged.
Is that over-concentration on modeling exercise would not lead us anywhere in terms of advising the country is concerned. In my view, there are two kinds of research. Research for the advance of the knowledge, research for trying to advance in policy. So they are not necessarily the same. Universities today, basically, in the country where I studied, and the university where I studied, is overwhelmingly advancements of knowledge and modeling based kind of exercises made, all kinds of tests. Behavioral economics now is a huge part in, for example, Yale University. Whole chair is there. So rationality of economics, books after books are written. So that's one kind of research. Another kind of research wants to influence policy of the irrigation policy in X country. It's an entire kind of research. So what I would advise those who are going to study development economics, that it's a tough job, very difficult these days. And I don't know what are taught these in development economics. In my days, it was different development economics. It's starting of development economics. We were told that you must study very seriously history of economic thought. Leontief, who taught me macroeconomics, he used to teach us Marxian economics. Leontief is the father of the input-output model. How come he teaches Marxian economics? I still remember he said, gentlemen, remember, Marx is the greatest character reader of capitalist system. Nobody has ever analyzed better than he. Now, can you imagine these things being taught today? Out of the question. And we were taught, again, that history, economic history, you must read very carefully. Economic history is essential for those who are studying development economics. Lessons of history are radically important. So my advice to development economics who want to study is that it's a very tough job now, just doing micro surveys and 5 surveys saying this is what women should do in Tanzania, in village X, therefore let us do it, would not do anymore. You have to have multi-country studies. So I don't know what to advise them, accepting that I have not seen the syllabus, what they teach to this, and I have to advise on the basis of examination of syllabus. I don't know. But I'm saying, what are the issues they have to be concerned with? Econometric modeling and 100 odd types of modeling would not do. Before I finish, I want to quote Lady Summers. You know who is he, right? So he has written I written a paper for the IFPRI. It's called Evidence-Based Research and Effect on Policy. Rajul was involved in approving it. It was a very uncomfortable paper. Nobody has read it, I'm sure about it. I will advise some of you to read it. I quote there Lady Summers a comment. He says, we economists go around giving advice on basis of our empirical study. And what should be the basis of the empirical study? At this stage, there is serious controversy that if national debt exceeds GDP of beyond 70 or 80%, economic collapses. 2 Nobel laureates wrote about it. One was at Harvard and became world famous. A student from Massachusetts University got another set of data, proved that it does the opposite. Huge hue and cry all over the developing world. How is it possible? So this wise man came along and said, yes, it's possible because we draw conclusions from one study. So hereby I advise my economist friend, development economists, policymakers, that A, you should collect data of different types, time series, cross-section, randomized trial, whatever, all kinds, and use all of them by multiple methods of estimation, and then get a large number of results. If all of them more or less coincide, then you feel more confident. Then don't go ahead and advise the policymakers. Stop, think. Is it severely counterintuitive? Then again, maybe you should do some study of similar country before you go to country X.
Stop.
Not very encouraging, is it?
No.
I'm afraid not.
I have Mark at the back, and then, one moment, Mark Rosegrunt. Can you give the mic to him first? And then we'll come over here. And if there's any, I keep looking in this side. If I'm missing anything on this side, let me know. Mark, you're first.
Thanks. Yeah, Nurul, you mentioned your long-time interest in democracy and policymaking in democracies. What do you make of the current trend in much of the world towards increasing authoritarianism and myopic nationalism? And do you see any factors that could help reverse that in coming years, or is this something we're going to be living with for a long time to come?
Yeah. I don't know the answer. It's a subject for research, a very serious one. There is a theory which says that democracy is a hindrance to development. Seriously developed, seriously thought about. And in Asia, they tell us that look at the example of 3 countries. Korea, which is always, we're advised to follow them, South Korea, dictatorship. Singapore, dictatorship. Malaysia, almost dictatorship. These are high-performing Asian countries. So you see, the poorer countries should follow their examples. Because democracy does not facilitate development interest, it hinders them. So I do not know this is what that. This is a subject, I think, serious research by development economies, very serious one. Now, the fact that all over the world there is decline of democracy, developing all countries, does it really hinder facilitates development? I do not know. In fact, I wanted to do a study, if I had time and resources and an ability. Is it said that there is a school of thought, it says that authoritarian governments and development go together. Now, example of Korea set aside on the whole. Now, can it be tested? I do not know. It's worthwhile testing, is it true? Let's say development is a function of nature of government plus some other factors. Now, we do not know what are other factors. One hypothesis could be a dictator who is committed to development, a la Growth Commission, and believes in and takes policies to promote development will be the best solution for developing countries. That's the kind of, I'm groping answers for the question on the back. I don't know the full answer.
Well, I think we're all going to be grappling with it, and I'll come back in a moment towards the end on what do you feel you've missed doing. But let's give the mic over here.
Thanks. I'm Paul Eisenman. I'm now an independent consultant, and I've only known Nurul for a bit over 4 decades or so, and have greatly admired his contributions to development, and also greatly admired him as a humane, decent, as well as a very capable human being. You've talked a lot about the problems of development, and including on the last question, and yet we see that so many countries, particularly more populous ones, have made well-known enormous progress in growth, in life expectancy, and et cetera. And I wonder if you would take a look at the positive side and give your view, and at the risk of extreme generalization, it seems like, leaving aside whether governments are authoritarian or democratic, if you have stable governance with a strong motivation from the government to be committed to development rather than just kleptocracy or whatever, and a country that avoids serious armed conflict, it's amazing how many countries have not done well, in fact, and if you add in the neighborhood effect, how many aren't you struck, in spite of all of the problems that you've mentioned, by the surprising progress that has been made, including progress in convincing ministers to do things they first thought were politically impossible? So let me leave it there and ask you to comment a little on the positive side of what has been accomplished, and not just in Bangladesh, which has done extraordinarily well.
I agree with you fully. I'm emphasizing the negative side, the challenges rather than past achievements. Angus Deaton had written a book several years ago, precisely taking the point that, look here, what's all this complaint about? Look at the drastic decline in the death rate, tremendous development. What more do you want? Drastic improvement in living standards, in the health situation. And food supply, for example. People aren't starving anymore. So what is he worrying about? I agree with you. There are serious positive sides. The death rate, disease, incidence of disease tremendously decreased, infinitely. So there are extremely high rates of achievement in various areas. At the same time, we worry about challenges because we could do better in other areas. It's not denigrating or denying the progress made already. As I said, he would insist that forget about the rest of it, that there's two enough. death rate and disease control. Depends on what you look at it, And of course, level of living has gone up. How can you deny that? Now, I say my basic theory is challenge and response. All countries faced with challenge and responded, some well, some not bad, some very well. So they have done it under various circumstances. Now, that we do not know. What combination of circumstances? We know, we try to know. I go back to South Korea all the time because in Asia we have been asked repeatedly to follow South Korean example. No, I get confused by South Korean example. Why? Very high rate of growth, very true, after the World War, 1916 or now. After all, what are the historical circumstances if I follow Growth Commission report? Historical circumstance was North and South Korea has to prove to survive that it can do much better than the communist alternative. So the dictator of South Korea decided, I am totally committed to development. Correct? So that's a unique situation again. Now South Korea did tremendous amount of advanced progress in education and land reforms. Now who did that? Japanese occupiers. Before independence, the massive education was introduced, mass education by Japan. Land reforms introduced by Japan, not by South Korean government. So again, what do you do about that? So these two basic ingredients of equitable development were done before South Korea became independent. The third one was the challenge of communism to prove I'm better. Now, already there is the preconditions are set there, and you do make tremendous progress, and the rest of the world, the Western world, was committed to promoting South Korea's progress. So I don't know what lessons to draw from here. So that is why I say the question, I discussed it before, what questions we have asked, what questions we have not asked. In analyzing history, I have this serious problem. We get books after books written on how and what. Very few books written on why. So why is the greatest challenge in our understanding development process? Otherwise, how and what, then why can't I do it? That's the issue.
Nurul, that was a very interesting response back, and I'll come back. I would like us to close the session so that we can have a lunch break and so forth, and also give time for Nurul to continue his quest for more knowledge. But let me ask, any final round of question or comment from the room or online? And if not, then I will give Nurul a chance to make a closing response. So Nurul, let me come back to you. In the closing, in all the years I have known you, you have been immensely curious. You've always had a thirst for knowledge. You're always wanting the why, the how, the what. And I'm curious to know what makes you curious today. What are you curious about? What occupies you and your curiosity? And what would you like to leave us with as a closing remark? What should we be curious about?
My obsession now is politics of development,
Please.
how to investigate, how to test the hypothesis that democracy and development either negatively correlated or positively correlated. This is a basic question in the light of what is developing all over the world. Right? There is a trend, decline in democracy all over the world. It's all agreed now. There is consensus, there's a decline in democracy. However you understand democracy, political democracy, let us say, is declining. Now, in that context, what happens to development? Better or worse? Now, I again come back to governance issue. This is beyond democracy as such. I don't think we have done much research on governance and development. That's my... And curiosity, one final remark, Einstein is supposed to have said that the moment you stop learning, that is the moment you start dying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please join us for lunch outside, and thank you very much to Nurul for sharing himself with all of us. Nurul, appreciate that. Thank you.